the Street View images to extract a lot of the data that were very hard to get from previous survey process. And further, they use this data extracted from Street Views to analyze other phenomena in the city. However, if we scrutinize all this paper, you will find that there are two main methods that has been used in all of these studies, just based on the computer vision tools that have been used. The first one will be always adopt the pixel level classification, which is the image you see here. They can extract, like with a computation tool called segmentation, we can actually extract all these labels from each image to automatically know where there's a building, there's a road, there's car, and greenery. And then use these topics so we can further study other topics we're interested in, such as crime, health, walkability, etc. Another branch of study actually jump out of this kind of a pixel level estimation. They go into the direct image level classification. So this is like a very old project done by MIT's media lab actually. So this was called Place Pause. So actually researchers use a lot of images and get around, I think it's around 30,000 reviews from online, and they ask people between these two images, which one you feel is safer and which one looks beautiful or wealthy or lively, etc. So using this kind of label, they can start to train model and then further predict the image on different locations in cities or different cities. However, when we look at all these studies, we find there's one single point that's interested us, is most of the studies are actually focusing on one specific topic. For example, researchers will estimate real estate price, obesity rate in a certain region with the data extracted from Street Views. We all know that urban life is actually very abundant, a lot of different aspects we all care about. So here we want to ask, can we actually evaluate the value of Street View images across different sections or across different aspects of urban life we care about? So based on that thought, we actually asked two specific research questions here. So the first one is, among all these socioeconomic profiles we care about, which ones can be better estimated from the objective characteristic of Street View images? And the second one is, how well can we actually infer these socioeconomic profiles from the image compared to other data we commonly use in the city studies, like urban studies, for example, PUIs. To be able to answer these questions, we collect the data first. The data in our study actually cross 7 metropolitan areas, which across 12 states and 80 counties. And we actually got like 27 million Street View images, from which we aggregated to 13 Street View features. We call it SVF. And then we also collected 1.1 million POIs for the comparison. And using this data, we actually use them to predict 18 dependent variables that are across 4 main categories. Their health, transport, crime, and poverty. So this model is actually very simple. We first use all the Street View features in the data to predict the variables here we care about. And then on the other side, we also use the same POI feature collected from all these cities to predict the same variables. And then we compare the result between each other. And then what you can see here, the result is very obvious. On this figure A, the x-axis are actually the model performance using the POI alone, and the y-axis are the model performance used the Street View features alone. And we plot this 45-degree lines for your reference. So we can see that almost all of the models, this is like around 124 model. Most of the models and the Street View features definitely perform better than the POI features. But we also observe that these two results are usually correlated. And then when we look at a cluster of different variables, we will see that those vehicle travel variables are much more easier to predict. And then the performance accuracy can almost reach around 80%. And we also repeat the study at different study units, from census block groups to census tracts. So we know that the data is like consistent, generating consistent results. After processing all this data in the first test, we also ask ourselves, we all know that since 2007, this like famous paper published, we know that population matters a lot in cities. Sometimes you can surely use population as the only input and to estimate a lot of aspects of city. So we are actually asking, can we just do that without considering any street view images or POI labels? Can population alone do similar estimation for us in all of these parameters we care about? And then here, I just want to claim that the population we're using here is actually dynamic population. So it actually involves the daily visitors. So in the day, people come and go, and also the night residents. So this is to control. This is to avoid those places that have no people living, but only workers coming in the day. So the results is presenting here. These two graphs are comparing the results between the POI and the dynamic population, and comparing the street view feature and the population. You can see that both POI and the street view features are performing a lot more better than the dynamic population alone. And specifically, you have to see that for all these like health-related variables, dynamic population can rarely do anything. Like the accuracy is almost close to zero. And in the end, we're also trying to see, because the study is conducted in the US, a lot of data in the US are quite available to us. For example, the people of color, age, and location, and the actual local population. So we're asking ourselves, since we know that a lot of studies have shown that like the places racial distribution and age can influence a lot of factors in the city. If we already have this data, does street view image still count, or do we still need street view feature at all? So what we did here is we conduct another series of studies, basically including all these parameters we just talked about. So the gray bar you see here are actually the performance of the models. We only take into consideration the population, age, and and the people of colors. And the light blue bars here are the actual adds-on of the R-squares that you can gain by adding the street view features here. So just to be honest, you can see that the add-on value of street view features ranges from 5% to 25%. A lot of places, it has a lot more value than we thought. For example, when we're estimating the percentage of people walk and bike, it definitely adds up a lot of information to the model. However, for some parameters like cancer, we have to say that street view feature has like a limited value in in this kind of a model estimation. So just as a summary, the contribution of the study are threefold. The first thing is we quantify the value of street view features in uncovering the neighborhood socioeconomic status of a wide variety. So this is the major difference than from the previous paper you might have already read. And the second one is that street view feature actually best estimate the travel behaviors, but are poorest at estimating certain health outcomes such as cancer, diabetes, and mental health. So this one is actually, we're trying to anchor the point that during the COVID, the UN Habitat actually released a report in 2022 indicating that researchers and also local government should seek for other available data in replace of those missing survey data, because during that years everyone is on social distance, like it's impossible to do face-to-face survey. So remote sensing data was actually like well-known, like good proxy for a lot of these. So actually trying to see if street view features can also do similar stuff. But we can see that for certain parameters to describe cities, like this kind of health parameters, like street view feature can hardly do anything. So these are places that we should also emphasize on further data, like further more accurate data collection. And lastly is we have already seen that street view feature outperforms the data sources such as POIs and dynamic populations. So I think this one is probably very useful for urban researchers who have been using POIs and dynamic populations a lot for their studies. So street view features can pave the way to maybe more studies in depth. And lastly, I want to emphasize that you might have read this study that a lot of researchers in the neuroscience or the medical field, they have started to use AI tools to actually early predict some diseases from people's face just by looking the face or looking at a 3D image of the face. The value of this kind of study is that they can help to detect those diseases at early stage and then can start to suggest some early interventions to prevent the disease from growing. And our hope is that by using if people's face matters a lot, maybe the look of city also matters a lot. If we can identify the potential of increasing crime or increasing health problem in the places by looking at the city's appearance, then we can encourage the local government to adopt early interventions to prevent that from happening. But our study right now is really just a baseline. So there are a lot more work to do in this field. Apart from street view images, like adopting the computer vision tools, we also have done a lot of other experiments. So this map you are looking at is actually we use a simple trained mass Gaussian model to apply to a dash cam installed on the bus. So the bus just running around cities, and we have a dash cam camera that can collect video footage from it, and then we train a model to identify where people tend to jaywalking. So there's context in Hong Kong is very strict. If you jaywalk and you cross the street illegally, you got fined 3,000 HK dollars, something like that. So this one we actually capture where people tend to jaywalk. So it's an interesting project. The position we have is we feel like the places people tend to jaywalk might indicate this place actually need better urban design. They might just need a proper crossing for people to use. And we published this paper broadly in the AAP. And then another one similarly. So this one is more about social interaction. In this paper, we actually collaborate with this local agency. We have a camera installed in the very high point of a park, and we capture a whole day movement of all people playing around in the park. And what interests us is to observe when those people moving together. So you see in this diagram is for those people that are in color being the same, that meaning they have been identified as group. So as public park has this kind of function to encourage more social interaction. We're trying to study what kind of intervention in the park are actually successful attracting people in groups or even encouraging new groups formations. And this study was also published this year in EPB. And we're currently collaborating with MIT's lab, also doing a further study using more videos to identify group activities. And then the last part I'm going to elaborate a little bit more is actually jumping out of street view images or computer vision. It's more about human behavior, which is kind of very interest to myself because the urban theory I'm trying to discuss here. So this paper was actually inspired by the very early literatures from Jane Jacobs or Richard Florida, that density or diversity is actually the core asset of a city. So diversity means different skill set of people can meet each other. And then how the diversity is formed in the city is believed to be driven by density. And with diversity, there will be more higher economic vibrancy in the cities. However, on the other side, there are crime background literature also feels like diversity might mean unstable environment or just an unstable community in short, which means that's community more likely to have crime or people losing jobs, drop-offs, etc. But when we look at those literatures, we will realize that even though we have believed these kind of theories for a long time, when we talk about them, we rarely discuss what is the context of these literatures. If you look at them, you will see that most of the context of this literature are only focusing on residential area, and their scales are more like a neighborhood scale or city scales. So what it means is that when we talk about people's behavior or activities every day, how many hours do you think you stay at home or your own residential area? probably just around 10 hours. Most of the time, you're still going to work, you meet people at different places of cities. Then can we actually capture the diversity level or how socially mixed you are during your daytime activity? And what kind of factors in city we can actually build to enhance the experience, the diversity beyond the density already established in the city. And then lastly, we want to ask, will this kind of diversity come with the price of prime? So just to emphasize, the resolution of the study different from the previous ones we discussed. This one will be more on street level. And then the topic we're talking about here, we call it experience the social mixing, which means like we really focus on activity space. And lastly, this kind of social mixing is defined by the income. There are different kind of metrics that you can define what is called diversity or social mixing. So previous study have done racial and income mostly, but this one will mostly focus on income. And then, so the core part is how do we do this? So for this study, we actually acquire I think like more millions of mobile phone record from people who moving around 3 major metropolitan areas for 3 months. What we can do is by using these people's moving history or a device moving history, because we don't actually know who they are. We just look at the device IDs. We will see, we will identify where or which census block groups they live. And because in the US, the places are usually very segregated on income. So based on their living census block group, we can also infer what is their income level. So based on the inferred income level, we can rank all these people into income groups. So 1, 2, 3, 4, we have 4 income groups here. And by looking at when and where they visit during the day, each day, we can calculate for this street, for example, how many times of the street are occupied by people from group 2 or group 1 versus group 4. The matrix here, the ESM here, is actually measuring the balance of distribution of time spent by all group of people in this one single street. And with this matrix, we can actually start to visualize or to understand how mixed are your cities. So this is just Boston downtown for people who are familiar with these places. What you can firstly observe is some streets that are close to each other can also present a very different diversity score or the ESM. So we're showing the street view here just to give you a sense of what it looks like. The number 1 street is fully occupied by people from number 2 group. And then the number 2 street here is more balanced. It has people almost spread out from different income group. So this phenomenon actually interests us to answer what kind of city attributes or urban attribute can actually lead to higher diversity. And then is this density alone can explain, or that's something else? So we start to add more attribute here. We include the residential mixing, residential income, and all those venues like restaurants, retails, coffee shop, etc. And lastly, we also include a street score feature, which is actually a indicator of perception of safety. So this is just to explain to you what I mean perception of city. This is also a deep learning model we applied on images to extract how this place looks safe or not, which is similar to the Place Pulse project I explained before. And then by using the data from different years, we can also see this place migrating from under construction to fully built. That their safety level score predicted from this deep learning model actually increase, which means this one looks safer than the previous time. And here's the result. So basically what we observe is that by comparing the 2 models, we find that before including the density, which we define here by the number of visitors in each street, before we include the density features, the venues play a very important feature in this model. But after we include it, the value of the venue actually dropped a lot. However, the residential income mixing is always a very important feature in estimating the social mixing in this area. Which means even though we're not talking about residential income mixing, the residential diversity still matters a lot in estimating the experience of social mixing. And then the street score, however intricate it is, it's not that mattering in the study. And then here is we're trying to show the by dropping off different like small streets or streets with very small sample of visitors, we still get a consistent result. So this is to show that we have trying to avoid a small sample bias in the data. And then here is we're visualizing by looking at the coefficient from each values, we can also see the different value of values in the cities by if they're encouraging or reducing the social mixing. What we can observe that's consistent between the two model, places with like a coffee or tea shop and the food venues are always like more encouraging social mixing. However, at least like in the area we studied, the shopping mall area is not that encouraging when you considering the when you control for the total density of the place. And lastly, we also look at like longitudinal changes, like the change of food business, the change of people with like bachelor degree in the area. They all play an important factor. They might even be the cause of the change of social mixing. But this one is, although it's a DID model, it's not a straight causal inference. So we will more describe it, the change of the food business. More food business established between 2 years. We're seeing more highly socially mixed streets. And lastly, about crime. So as I mentioned before, a lot of time we feel like the diverse place usually will capture more crime. Is this true? In our data set, we feel like we can see that the trend is actually reversed after controlling for the density of the area. Large cities have higher crime, like that's already well stated in previous literature. However, we're seeing here is dense city or large cities with more diverse group or diverse experience, you are less likely to see crime happening. So this is basically our conclusion, as I have already mentioned. First of all these like social mixing matrix we calculate has a very high resolution. You can see you can see like a high jump or very different social mixing across like very adjacent streets. And then also beyond the density, we find there are other attributes can further encourage diversity in the street. And lastly, we know that diversity is not leading to crime. On the contrary, it might control crimes. So that's about it. That's all my presentation today. If there's any question, like feel free to ask. Thank you.
Thank you, Yuan. So is there any question from the audience? So actually, I have one. So for the first study you have mentioned for the PNAS study, you introduced maybe 16 street view features, right? I want to know how do you include those features in your modeling? Yeah.
Oh yeah. So basically, these are features you extract from each image. Like we're calculating like how many pixels of the image is actually composed of trees, buildings, or roads, or anything else, and then they are putting as like a as independent variable into the model. It's a loss regression model.
Okay, so the 60, you put all of 16 features, or you selectively put different features in the different Y?
Well, we put all of them in. So all the models are using the same parameters, so they're comparable.
Okay, yeah, get it. Yeah, so is there any other question from the audience? You can type in the chat, and yeah. Okay. And another thing is that for the social mixing research, so you are estimate the income of the device for the person from the income of the census block group, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I once used that for another maybe using the census blocks income to measure the individual income, but there's some kind of variety from that. So
There are.
if you have any.
There are. We actually So in the full paper, in the formal paper we publish, it is we only state the method of using the like where people live to indicate like their income level. But we also test, like in the census block group from the ACS census data, you can get a distribution of different level of income. We also we also did another exercise, randomly assign people to one of these income group based on the distribution of this income group in the census block groups, and the results are similar.
Okay, and in the presentation you mentioned that you maybe it's your further plan. You want to detect the disease from people's face, right?
Oh,
don't know if
no,
you.
I didn't want to that. I didn't want to do
Okay, oh,
that. I
sorry.
was that's other people's research. I'm
Okay,
just
okay.
using that as an energy that like why we can do this in cities. Like if that's already proved in biomed, then we can also use that similar thought in cities. So,
Okay, I thought you were going to do that because
I'm not gonna-
in the first research you see that your prediction for disease is kind of relatively low than others.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's like two completely thing. I mean, predicting like the disease from person face, like they have a lot more great data just by at individual level. They can do that, and then it's already proved. And there are like a lot of paper on it. Like they already test out what kind of disease can be detected on face, what cannot. So it's like a very established field already. Mm.
Okay, and there's another one. So you have a second research to identify the risk for jaywalking, right? So how do you determine if the person's walking behavior is a jaywalking? So you cannot
Uh-huh.
just detect them. You need to maybe you need to
Yeah.
count the red light, right?
Well, okay. So for that one, I have to say, like our definition of jaywalking is really just people randomly walking on the street rather than
Okay.
if they're not walking on the crosswalk, then it's considered as a jaywalking. So what we did is we actually labeled I think around like 200 images, just like capture all those like jaywalking people and also people who are not jaywalking. So we have a balanced data set. We label all the data and then train like a Mars Garson model on it, and
Okay.
that's about it.
Okay. Yeah.
Mhm.
Thank you. So
Mhm.
thank you very much. Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah, thank you
forgot
very
to
much.
introduce you in the first because yeah, there's some problem with the
No, that's
audience
fine.
voice. So yeah,
Yeah.
sorry about that. And
Yeah.
you have a wonderful presentation and good research. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for organizing.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So
Okay.
our
See you.
meeting is about to end. Thank you very much. Thank you
Cool.
for the audience.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys.